NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On NHL podcast, Tuesday edition. Joe DiBiase from Locked On Sabres, Mike Distefano from Locked On Leafs. Mike, how are we doing today?
I'm doing decent. Lack of sleep for myself. I had a busy weekend.
Yes. You had a fun weekend, it sounded like.
It was a fun weekend. It was a bachelor party, and we were safe-ish.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of fun, so all good.
Labor Day in the States here. Is it Labor Day there? The Labour? I don't know. I'm just making that up. I don't know if it's a thing or not.
Actually, yeah. I think so. I now that you say that, I'm pretty sure it is. Let me look it up. I'm pretty sure it is Labor Day, like OUR, because we like to do all that kind of stuff. Yes, it is.
There's
Labor Day OUR. I forgot that was different.
Sports Center is always the one that comes to mind for me on that. CENTRE. Yeah, I think just 3 days off for you too. The Mondays off.
Yep. So Monday's a big long weekend. So you had the Saturday off, the Sunday, and the Monday. So Friday night I was partying pretty hard. Saturday, ditto, and then Sunday, full recovery day. Just full recovery. Couched it from the minute I got home. It was about a 4-hour drive up north where I was, so it was a little bit of a trek to get back home. But once I did, definitely couched it up until AEW came on, and I actually watched that with a cousin. So it was a fun weekend, and capped off by chatting about the next grouping here on our Locked On NHL top 50 list. What are we going through here? 20 through 11 today?
20 through 11, and then we will have the top 10 on Friday's edition with me and Rachel. But today, 20 through 11. I think 20 through 11 to me is a more interesting list. I think there are better debates to be had in this range of the list, so we will get to that today. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Sneaky Joe Sports. Mike's at Mickey_Canuck. If you're listening to the podcast on possibly the Odyssey app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Locked On NHL, where you can watch this episode and all of our episodes going forward as a video element to it. Before we get into the list, though, which we'll do in just a second here, we're doing, by the way, if you haven't been keeping up with us, you can check out the previous episodes of the show, YouTube or Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, with our top 50 players in the NHL list for the 2021-22 season as voted on by the local experts on the Locked On NHL Network. So we'll jump back into that with number 20 in just a moment. But first, what was your reaction to the Montreal Canadiens deciding not to match the offer sheet of 1 year, $6.1 million for Jesperi Kotkaniemi and letting him go to Carolina for a first and a third as compensation?
I thought it was the right deal. It was definitely the right deal to do that. I thought $6.1 million was just a little bit too much. Then they would have also had to match him next season at that same price. And I didn't see it happening. I thought that was just too much money. So I thought they made the right decision. Apparently he's going to move over to the wing and be a fixture for Carolina. I wouldn't be shocked if there's like a framework of some sort of extension in place in Carolina where his AAV will come down next year and for the next few seasons if he signs, like a 3 or 4 year deal at like $4.5 million or something like that. But I would be shocked if next season he's making that amount of money for Carolina, to be quite honest with you, unless he just absolutely kills it this year, which I don't anticipate.
Right.
He scored 5 goals last year, 6 goals the year before that. This isn't a player who has been lighting the league on fire that is deserving of this type of money. This was absolutely, no matter what Don Waddell says, this was to spite the Montreal Canadiens, to spite Marc Bergevin for trying to bring Sebastian Ajo to Montreal. The problem is that, now he has to sit there with the $6.1 million cap hit on a player who's given you bottom 6 production over the last couple of seasons.
Right. I think best case scenario for Carolina is that it is only a 1 year deal. It is only $6.1 million. And then you will retain his rights next year and you will have that contract going forward at a lower cap number. So basically, this was a way of getting Kotkaniemi's rights. And for 1 year, you've got to pay a big premium. And as a contending team, that is valuable cap space that you are not going to have. I do think for years to come, if they have him on their team for the next 2, 3, 4 years, I think they'll get to a point where it's a more valuable contract and it's easier to stomach. And this is the premium, I guess, you got to pay for doing what you did. But I do think, like you said, even though I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for them in the future, I don't like it for this year at all, that cap hit. I definitely think it was motivated by Ajo and by Montreal offer sheeting him a couple of years ago. Anything happen in this whole situation that makes you think we're going to get more offer sheets? Are we going to continue to get almost none? I think we probably stay the same.
If anything, this might like deter offer sheets. There barely have been any anyways. But if this is going to be like the retribution aspect of it, it's like if you offer sheet my guy, I will offer sheet your guy, and I'll screw you a couple of years later. Like if that's what's going to happen, and that's kind of the precedent that's being set here, then I don't know how a lot of teams are going to take that. And if that becomes it, like we saw this happen a few years ago with Vancouver and St. Louis when St. Louis got offer sheeted, or Vancouver offer sheeted David Backes a few years back, and then they were forced St. Louis was forced to sign him to a big contract, and then they offer sheeted Steve Bernier the following year from Vancouver, who are forced to sign him at a larger cap hit. So there's been precedent of this retribution type of offer sheeting, and we just saw it happen again. So I don't know if we'll see this happen, because if you offer sheet one team, a couple of years later, they're going to come right back and say, hey, remember when you did this to us? Now we're doing it to you. And we'll see what ends up happening. But if anything, I think this could potentially deter it. But like, what's it deterring? Like seeing one, now we'll see
a decade,
5 years instead of one every 4 years. Like,
yeah,
there's barely offer sheets as is. But this certainly, I think, doesn't help the cause to get more, which sucks because this was fun.
It is fun,
like it, right?
I know. I love it. I hope it doesn't deter it, but I think you're probably right that we're going to continue to see very few of these in the coming years.
What did you think of them flipping that first pick and giving up another additional future second to go out and get Christian Dvorak, though? Like, do you feel like he overpaid and emotionally made this trade because he had just lost Kotkaniemi?
I think so. I think a lot of that was at play, that you just were in the Stanley Cup final and you got to kind of sell to your fans a little bit. Like, yeah, okay, look, we decided to take the draft pick compensation for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and that's a body off of our team who scored a very important playoff goal for them last year, by the way. But we're replacing him with this guy, like something tangible that they could put in front of their fans and say, we're still trying to win, and we're still trying to win right now. And we are committed to doing that. So here's a player that's going to replace him in the lineup, and we think could even do better. I think they overpaid. I would not have given up a first plus for Christian Dvorak, but a nice player, not an amazing player, but a nice player. But I think so. I think if they weren't getting that draft pick compensation for Kotkaniemi, I don't think they're making that trade. And I think it was a little bit reactionary.
I like the deal. I think I agree with you. I think a first round pick would have been suffice, and I guess the second is in like 2024, so it's a couple of ways
right.
in the future, right? So I guess it's a little more stomachable, but still, I like it, and the contract is right. He's got 4 more years left on the deal at 4.45, and he's somebody who I think is a decent second line center. So he's going to come in play behind Nick Suzuki, and that'll kind of form their 1-2 punch that they'll have. So, they'll be slightly more competitive, I think. Like, I think Dvorak may be a better player right now than Kotkaniemi, and would have been is an upgrade for next season for Kotkaniemi. But a couple of years down the road, I mean, KK's still 21 years old. I mean, he could turn into something pretty decent. I think the thought process is that he's supposed to be a top 6 center. But as for now, I actually think that deal, swapping out Kotkaniemi for Dvorak going into next season, actually probably makes the Canadiens a better team.
Yep. I think for on ice right away, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Let's jump into our top 20 list. Top 50 NHL players for the 2021-2022 season is voted on by the Locked On NHL local experts. We are at 20 on our list. If you missed our previous episode, me and Rachel Donner bounced through 21 through 30 on Friday's edition of the show. Just to catch you up, from 50 up, Max Pacioretty, Ryan O'Reilly, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Aaron Ekblad, Chris Letang, Philip Grubauer, John Carlson, Johnny Gaudreau, Kirill Kaprizov, Miro Heiskanen, John Tavares, Matthew Tkachuk, Marc-Andre Fleury, Charlie McAvoy, Carey Price, Quinn Hughes, Roman Josi, William Nylander, Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo. Our last edition, 30 through 29, was at 30, Elias Pettersson, 29, Gabriel Landeskog, 28, Matthew Barzal, 27, Patrice Bergeron, 26, Jonathan Huberdeau, 25, Patrick Kane, 24, Mark Scheifele, 23, Dougie Hamilton, 22, Adam Fox, and 21, Mikko Rantanen. That gets us to 20, another goaltender. I believe our third goalie on the list thus far, fourth goalie on the list thus far, and it is Connor Hellebuyck of the Winnipeg Jets at number 20, an average vote of 24. So anybody on the 10 names that I read off that were previous to 20 through 11, any of those names you would have put above Hellebuyck, or would you even put Hellebuyck higher than this list or this ranking?
Patrick Kane for sure. The fact that Patrick Kane's not in the top 20, I think is just wild. Absolutely wild. So I'm surprised that he was ranked so low at 25. Even Jonathan Huberdeau, I think I would probably rank ahead of Connor Hellebuyck on this list. Maybe even Patrice Bergeron, who I think I would also put there as one of the premier two-way centerman in the league. I would have him in that top 20 range as well, probably ahead of Hellebuyck. But that being said, I think Hellebuyck is certainly, I would classify him as the second best goalie in the league next to Andrei Vasilevskiy. So I think having a second goalie here in the top 20 isn't too crazy. So I would I'm okay with him being slotted this high.
I had him as my number one goaltender. I think I was very
number one.
I had him as not a number one on the list. He was my top goaltender over Vasilevskiy. I think that what he's done, given the
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
You think Connor Hellebuyck is a better goaltender than Andrei Vasilevskiy?
I do. I think if you flip-flopped the two players, you put Vasilevskiy on Winnipeg and you put Connor Hellebuyck in Tampa Bay, I think you'd get as good, if not better, results in Tampa Bay out of Hellebuyck. And I'm not sure. I think you would get the same results out of Vasilevskiy, but let's see what Vasilevskiy would do without a super team in front of him. Because I've seen Connor Hellebuyck with an underwhelming Winnipeg Jets blue line in front of him, getting tons and tons of high-quality scoring chances against him, and I've seen him perform at an elite level. And Vasilevskiy, while he's not always on the greatest defensive team, he's on a team that always has the puck. And I think that makes his job a lot easier than it is for Connor Hellebuyck's. So I don't know if the gap is that big between them, but I love Hellebuyck's game. I think he's the best goaltender in the world.
Wow, that is some fire right there.
Got it. We had to have some little hot takes once in a while on this list.
Yeah, I like it, Joe. You know, you raise a valid point. Like, if you were to switch the two goalies, like, would they fare better on another team? And I mean, yeah, Connor Hellebuyck had an atrocious defense in front of him this year, and had to go up against the Canadian division, which had guys like Marner and Matthews and Brock Besser and obviously McDavid and Draisaitl, and they had to go up against all those guys with really no one to stop them. Like, Neil Pionk wasn't going to go ahead and stop these guys on the back
Tucker
end, right?
Poolman is always the name I get to, just because I love his name.
Tucker Poolman, who signed a multi-year $42.5 million deal in Vancouver, but that's a story for a different day. Yeah. But that's really interesting. Like, I see what you're saying here, but I do not think I could go ahead and call Hellebuyck as the top goaltender in the NHL. I think that belongs to Vasilevskiy, and deservedly so. So I'm not going to join the hot take bandwagon on that one, but I respect what you had to say and how you backed it up.
Yes. All right, 19 on our list. We spoke about the Carolina Hurricanes a little bit earlier with that offer sheet. Their number one center, Sebastian Ajo, comes in at number 19. Last season, 56 games played, just over a point a game pace, 57 points in 56 games played, 320 points in 366 games total. He really, in that 2015 draft class that was so star-studded at the top with McDavid and Eichel, and then Marner, of course, right after that, and then David Pastrnak in the later first round. Really, that's like the elite group. Like, that draft class has been so amazing, and you've got 5 guys from that class up front that are all, I think, elite players when they're at their best, and Aho is certainly a part of that. So I have no problem with him being ranked here at 19. I think I did have him a little bit lower in the early 20s. I think I had Adam Fox above him. I think I had Kane. I'd have to pull that up again. But I don't have a problem with him at 19. What about you?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with him in this range for sure. I'm with you though. I had Kane above him as well. That might be the only player actually. I may have even had Aho like slotted pretty well in here. Like Bergeron, I put Bergeron ahead of him as well. But outside of that, I think this is probably about where I'd put him. Like, I think Sebastian Aho is a top 20 player. I think that's a pretty good spot to have him at here. Like, he can do a little bit of everything, right? Like, he can score goals, he could drive play, he could set things up. He plays a pretty good two-way game. Like, I really, really like Sebastian Aho's game. He's one of my favorite players in the NHL to watch. So having him ranked here around the 20th spot makes a lot of sense to me.
Number 18 on our list, Braden Point of the Tampa Bay Lightning. We're gonna get a lot of Lightning coming up in this part of the list. You think too low?
Too low. Braden Point is so freaking good. Like, so good. And then you watch what he does when he's in the playoffs, and it's just like, you can't stop this man. Like, he just scores goals at will. He just moves that puck around. He plays elite two-way game. Like, Braden Point is, like, might be the best forward on the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, he might be.
Like, he might be the best forward on the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that's the super team that everyone says that they have, the best of everything. Well, if that means that, then that means that Braden Point is up there, which means he should easily be higher than 18. Like, there's a couple of names we're about to talk about that I would put Braden Point ahead. There's a name or two within the top 10 that I think I would put Braden Point ahead. I think that 18 is criminally low for one of the best players in the NHL.
He really proved, too, that he's not a product of Nikita Kucherov and Steven Stamkos this past season, with Kucherov missing the whole season, Stamkos missing parts as well, and Point really taking over as like, all right, like someone's gotta take the wheel here and carry the puck through the neutral zone and get things set up and be the main goal scorer. And he did it. Like, he was just under a point a game player, but he was very productive. He was the best offensive player for them during the regular season, and they were still really one of the best teams in the league. So I think any thought that he's just a product of what's around him, I think he kind of squashed that this year, and he proved that he's not.
Yeah, no, I don't. Like, I think that he is, like, he drives play himself. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
It helps when he's got guys like Kucherov in there. Like, obviously, you look at his numbers in the playoffs, and they're like almost 2 points per game. Like, it's insane what he's been able to do in the playoffs alongside those guys. But when it is just him, he also is able to get it done, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's the two-way ability of Braden Point, which I think is an underrated part of his game. Like, offensively, astounding, amazing. But he's got a two-way, like, edge to him. And I think that's why I have him ranked a little bit higher than this myself. But I still think that he's just so good.
Yep. Before we get to number 17 on our list, I want to remind you that rockauto.com is where you go to save time and money. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more on the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership. Example, Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store, $216 from Rock Auto. It's a family business serving do-it-yourself customers for over 20 years. Prices are reliably low for every customer. They've got everything you need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even to new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. And when you go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. And this episode is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. Today, we're going to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. DirecTV Stream brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part, there's no annual contract, so stop waiting. Get your TV together and DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Joe DiBiase, Mike Distefano here on the Locked On NHL podcast. Top 50 list, top 50 players for 2021-22.
Before we move on, I do also want to just quickly say this because I didn't realize it was this high. Do you know how high, like just coming off of talking about how skilled and how good Braden Point is, you know how high his like career shooting percentage is?
Man. I mean, I know for reference, like anything over 15 is crazy high. So I'm going to guess over 15.
His career shooting percentage, this is 350 games of NHL action. This is over 800 shots taken in the NHL. His shooting percentage is 17.3%.
That is wild.
His last 3 years, the last 3 years, when he's really taken that leap to becoming an elite player, it's 19%, 463 shots through 200 games.
That's nuts. That's so funny, too, because when I think of like Braden Point as a player, I don't think of him as like this elite goal scorer. I think he probably is, but I think of him as like the puck carrier guy. But
I think of like this guy's unbelievable shooter. Like he has an unreal shot. So I mean, like he's one of those guys. It's so hard if you're top 15 to be a top 15, top 20 player, but to still be considered underrated to me, like means something. And I think Braden Point is that guy where he's being ranked as 18. And I think that is just criminally low. And like, this is just another reason why. I mean, his like last 3 years, I mean, you can even toss in his 4th year, but the last 3 years, like his totals are just insane. If you take a look at his last 3 seasons, 201 games, 204 points. So he's over a point per game the last 3 seasons with 19.2% shooting percentage. Like it's just unreal what this guy can do with the puck. Unbelievable.
Number 17 on our list, by the way, is a player I've watched every second of since he entered the NHL. Another guy from the 2015 draft class, which we'll have a couple more coming up in a minute here. Jack Eichel of the Sabres gets in at number 17, the only Buffalo Sabre on the list, and he's really not even a Buffalo Sabre because I'd be stunned if he ever plays for them again. So you almost get a quasi player from Buffalo in here. Average vote of 21.1 above Braden Point. For the 17 spot. I'll let you go first on Eichel. How does that strike you? 17 for Jack.
I think it's an interesting position. Jack Eichel like hasn't played much hockey the last little bit, so it's even tough to kind of grade where he's at. You know what I mean? But like what he is when he is playing and like how good he was supposed to be, you would think, 17 makes sense. I think, but I'm just like I. It's almost like I forget how good he actually is because I haven't seen him play in so long. So I feel like I may have had him a little bit lower, like between like 20 and 25 in that range when I put my list together.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see where you're at because you've got a much larger grasp of the whole Eichel situation about how he's played his entire career. And, I don't know. I just, he hasn't played enough recently for me to like put him in that top 15 category.
I'll admit my bias up front because there was expectation for the guy coming in, and I've watched the guy. When you've watched a guy 5 to 10 times more than a player behind him, like point, then I think you're kind of naturally going to side with the guy that you've watched more because you feel like the expert of that player. So I don't want to get too much into that rabbit hole with Eichel. I did have him higher than 17. I think I had him at 10, if I remember right. So that would have been, I think I had him 6th for centerman. I think I had Barkhoff above him as well. And we'll get to him in a little bit as also. But I think when he's playing, he's a top 10 center in the NHL. When he's healthy, he's a top 10 center in the NHL. He might even be closer to number 5. But you've always got to kind of couch it. You've got to kind of explain why that's the case, because it's a little bit with like kind of the Hellebuyck complex from a little bit earlier. I'm taking into account who he's been around, who he's been playing with, and obviously what his environment has been with the Sabres. I mean, not even the past 2 years, 3 years, which is when we've seen his numbers gone up. But the first 3 years of his career, he's playing largely with third, fourth line grinders. Like his most common line mates were Marcus Foligno and Zemgus Girgensons and an aged Benoit Pouliot before he was out of the league. Like they were not providing him with much talent. And I think that really hindered the amount of assists really he was going to rack up, because the shooting percentage of his line mates was at like 7% for the first three years of his career. So I think he's a better player than what his production is. I think Sabre fans are going to get frustrated and they're going to be like, oh, Ryan O'Reilly all over again when he gets traded somewhere and starts lighting it up, because I think that's what's going to happen. I think he's going to get traded somewhere. He's going to get better teammates around him, and his numbers are going to be higher because of that. So I had him higher. I don't know if 10 is crazy high compared to where he was ranked, but that's where I had him. How does that strike you?
Like to me, top 10 seems a bit rich. Scored 2 goals last year.
I know. I'll another, like, again, excuses is really any argument there's going to be filled with excuses for Eichel. The guy was not right last year. I mean, he had 2 broken ribs and a shoulder injury, and that's part of the argument. I mean, part of the argument is maybe he's brittle. Like, that's not the first time he's missed games in his career.
Well, he's never had a full 82 game season. He did play 81 in his rookie year, so I guess you could basically count that. Then he played 61, so he missed 21 games his second year. Only played 67 games in his third year, 77 games in his fourth year, and then 68 last year, which was a shortened season. So I guess he probably played most of them.
Yeah,
they probably played around that many games, and then just 21 games last year. So he's missed a lot, and that was kind of like my point. Like the best ability is availability, and Jack Eichel, and even going forward, you still don't know what his availability is going to be. You don't know like how this surgery, which surgery he's going to have, and when it's going.
I'm starting to get worried about Team USA, because part of the argument for why this is like the best U.S. roster they've ever put on the ice is Team USA has always stunk down the middle. They've never been able to even come close to competing with not even Canada, like Russia and Finland and Sweden. Centerman has always been their downfall. And part of the reason I think there's been a lot of hype around next Olympics is it's Matthews, it's Eichel, it's Larkin. And he's a third of that. So you take him out of the mix. Dylan Larkin's still a great player, but now suddenly I'm putting, am I thrusting Jack Hughes into the mix, into the lineup? Like, it gets thin quick after that. And if he doesn't have a surgery soon, he might not be available for Beijing. And by the way, if you're Eichel, I think that's maybe why his frustration is ramping up. That guy's not played a meaningful hockey game in 6 years. He's probably dying to get to Beijing. And if he can't get there because of this surgery dispute, that's gonna take it to the extreme with how upset he is. So yeah, Eichel's a very interesting player. 17 is an interesting ranking for him. 16 is one of your guys we just got from a Sabre, Locked On Sabre, to Mitch Marner of the Maple Leafs. You're the Locked On Leafs guy. I did have him lower than Eichel, only a couple of spots. I did have Marner higher than this. I think he's one of the best wingers in the league, and he's one of my favorite wingers to watch in the league just because of his style.
Oh, absolutely. Like, the Toronto market, like, poo-poos Mitch Marner so much right now, and it's really only because of the contract. But like as a player, he's one of the best players in the NHL, and that's why it's so funny. We sit here and it's like trade Marner, trade Marner. Like that's the conversation that is being had in Toronto right now, and it's not because we're frustrated or because he wants to go. It's because his contract is just weighing this team down a bit, making just a hair under $11 million. Now, it would be okay if the Leafs also weren't paying DiBiase and Matthews more than that. So it just makes things so much more difficult. But we're talking about a guy who in back-to-back years has back-to-back-to-back years, 3 seasons in a row where he's well above a point per game. He had 94 points in 82 games 2 years ago, 67 points in 59 games 2 seasons ago, and then 67 points again this year in just 55 games. He's one of the, if I'm not mistaken, was also a top 5 for the what was it, Art Ross and MVP.
Yes.
So
he finished.
Tell me that a guy,
yeah,
you're gonna tell me that a guy that's top 5 in MVP voting doesn't deserve to be higher than 16th on the list? Come on now. Come on. I think Marner is a top 10 player in the NHL. I think do. Just hovering around that mark. Certainly the lowest I think I would put him would be like 12.
Do you think this is like him suffering from almost like that Malkin complex?
Yes.
Like just kind of living in Matthew's shadow a little bit?
100% I do, because he's looked at as like a Robin, right? Like Batman and Robin. Robin's the main attraction, and you've got the sidekick in Robin, right?
Yeah.
But they just got 2 Batmans. They've got 2 of the best in the NHL. Like that's what they got. They got Batman and Superman. Like that's what they have in one team on one line. It's incredible. Granted, Mitch Marner's play in the playoffs has been piss poor. Like this guy has 1 goal in the last 2 playoff rounds. Like he just can't score in the playoffs. I don't know what the issue is there, and that could be a reason for why he ended up getting ranked a little bit lower by a lot of people, just because his playoff performances, like where it matters, granted, has been really bad the last couple of seasons, and that could be why he's falling out of favor with some people. But when you look at him when he's on, like when he is on in the regular season and when he's playing at his best, at his peak, he is easily a top 10 talent in this league.
Next at 15, Alex Ovechkin, the great 8, left winger for the Washington Capitals. Obviously a legend in the sport, chasing the Gretzky record, which I know the bet is up over at Bet Online if you want to bet on whether or not he's going to get there. 24 goals, 18 assists, 42 points in 45 games last season. Almost a point-a-game player as a 35-year-old man who is getting gray quickly up top.
He's been getting gray since he was like 27.
Yeah. I had him lower than this. Not a crazy amount lower. It's just, he's kind of getting run over a little bit in his own end, even compared to what he used to be. He was never a Selke winner, obviously, Alex Ovechkin. But the defensive game has definitely gone by the wayside. But it's fine because I think, a player like this, that's going to happen with him at the later stages of his career anyway. And his goal-scoring ability, it really hasn't dropped off, right? Like last year, he's still at a near almost a 50-goal pace. So I guess it's not even really a little bit lower. I mean, the guy, I would be surprised if he came out and scored 50 goals this season. I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't be stunned.
I'm kind of betting on it because in a fantasy league, a dynasty league, I traded for him, thinking that for the next 3-4 years he'd go out and put up between 40 and 50 goals, because I could see it happening, because he's just like one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific goal scorer in NHL history. That said, he's 35, and if we are doing this like top 50 players like right now at their skill level right now, this is probably a proper rating, I would say. I think he's still within the top 20, but has he fallen out of the top 10? Yes, I think other players who maybe have more of a two-way ability or are just equally as prolific as offensive players and just have a little bit more to their game, have moved past him a little bit, and he's just dropped down to 15. But still, at 35 years old, to be a top 15 player in the NHL is incredible. And this is a guy, again, who we believe is going to score somewhere between 40 to 50, maybe even as much as 55 goals, because he can just do that, because he's Alex freaking Ovechkin.
He's going to be 48 years old. He's not able to move. He's just standing on the faceoff circle, ripping 30 goals a year on the power play. The guy's shot is just, it's still there. And until it starts to taper off, he's one of the best goal scorers in the league and one of the best players in the league because of it.
Well, you talk about his shot still being there. We talked about Braden Point and his shooting percentage. It's not as high as Braden Point's, but still being there, I think, is the thing that I want to talk about here. But he has a career shooting percentage of 12.7, but in the last 4 seasons, it's actually 14.5%. But the thing
he's
about
getting better.
Right? The thing about Alex Ovechkin is he's a volume shooter. So when a volume shooter still has a shooting percentage of 14.5%, that's insane. He has almost 1,200 shots in these last 4 seasons that I am calculating, 2 of which have been shortened seasons. Like, that's how insane this guy is. And durability, too, has been, like, it's been there for Ovechkin. I know he missed some time this year, but like a majority of it was COVID-related. But, boy, this guy's a treat, and it's going to suck when he hangs it up in, at this point. It seems like he'll be at the end of that 5-year contract. Yeah. But if he's still a couple of goals away from the Gretzky record, he probably signs another 1-2 year deal just to make sure that he gets it.
I think he's got to average 33 goals a season over that 5-year deal.
Easily done. Easily
done. Like you said, if he's close at all, he's hanging around, I think. So
yeah. And I think you said last week it's what, plus 200?
Plus 200.
For him to beat it. So that's a pretty good bet to make over at Bet Online.
Yeah.
I believe.
Speaking of which, there's more than that over at Bet Online, although there's hockey odds for over-under point totals. So I know offhand, actually, they opened up last week. The Sabres were 3rd from the bottom, and money must have come in on the under because 3 days later, they had the lowest over-under point total in the NHL with 65.5, which is painfully low. Much lower than Seattle, who actually I saw a jump as well when those odds were updated. What do you think the Leafs is? If you're going to set an over-under point total for the Maple Leafs, what do you think it would be?
What I think it'll be, or what I think?
What do you think they set it at? What do you think
Vegas has it pretty high. I don't know why, but like I saw that they have them as like the 4th best team to win the cup, which means they probably have them in like the 105 point range.
Wow, I mean, it's like he looked it up, people. 105.5 is the over-under point total for the Maple Leafs at Bet Online. That is the 2nd highest total to Tampa, who is at 107.5. I think so. The Stanley Cup odds are a little different because I think all those teams being in the same division, I think like there's 4 of them, 5 of them even that affects them. Would you go over under though on that? Leafs at 105.5.
Under. I talked about this a couple of times. I'm taking the under on that. I'd be surprised if they broke the 100 mark this year. It's gonna be a tough division. It's gonna be a tough one for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah. But again, hockey's not the only thing you can catch over at betonline.ag. Take advantage of their opening day super promo. You make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th NFL season opener between the Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up and using the promo code 100. And college football is in full swing now, so be sure to check out some college football spreads as well. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbooks experts. Promo code locked on. Don't forget to use the promo code. All right, let's continue on with our list, and this is going to be a tough one. The toughest one on here. Number 14, Brad Marchand of the Boston Bruins. Do I have to say something nice about Brad Marchand here, or are you willing to take the bullet for me?
I hate Brad Marchand probably more than you do. I'll
Probably.
easily say that. As much as you Buffalo people think that the Bruins are your biggest,
I think
rival,
we know they don't care about us, but we still hate them. I guess is the way. Yeah.
look, Brad Marchand. As much as I hate to say this, and I hate to say this, is like one of the best players in the NHL, and he has been for the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years. Like, he's someone who he's like a fine wine. He just keeps getting better with age. Like 3 years ago, he had a 100-point season at age 30. Age 30, 100 points. Last season, in just 53 games, had 69 points, almost scored 30 goals through 53 games. Like, he legitimately, since having his first game or his first year where he scored at a point per game pace plus, which
Yep.
was 5 years ago. So last 5 years, he's got 426 points in just 350 games. Since his age 28 season, so it's through age 28 through to age 32, this man has been killing it in the NHL. He just like kicking ass, taking names, going deep on playoff runs, winning a Stanley Cup a few years back. Like I said, as much as I hate Brad Marchand, he truly is one of the most unique players and one of the best players in the NHL. Where he actually 3, 4 years has the same amount of goals as Nathan MacKinnon, but has a higher shooting percentage, which means he's shooting his volume of shots far less, but has the same amount of goals. His shooting percentage, the same 5-year span that I'm talking about, 17.2%
That's crazy.
in the last 5 years.
Braden Point territory, apparently. He's such an odd case too, because how often do you see players like see that meteoric rise at age 28 like he did? Because he was a good player the first 5-6 years of his career, but he was not this. And for a guy at 28 to just turn into what he became, like you rarely see that. So it's a testament to him. He did see an upgrade or a boost in playing time around that time where he started playing with Bergeron. But we were seeing flashes before that. You mentioned him winning the Stanley Cup as a rookie 10 years ago. I mean, he scored 11 goals in 21 playoff games that year as a rookie. So he's always been showing you that he had this in him, and the last 5 years, he's just been dynamite. So yes, I hate to say it. I think I would hate him even more if the Sabres had been good even once through the last 10 years. So I can feel like I can understand what you're going through. And he has been around long enough for me to see him play the Sabres in a playoff series. He's been around that long. It was him as a rookie, but it did happen. 2010. All right, so he is at number 14, which means we're at number 13 on the list. We're sticking a lot of Atlantic Division guys on this portion of the list. Alex,
tough division, very tough division.
Alexander Barkhoff of the Florida Panthers. I love this player. He had 58 points in 50 games last season, 62 and 66 the year before that. His career year in 2019 at 23, 96 points in 82 games played. I think one of the most underrated centers in the league. I think as a two-way centerman, he should maybe be discussed in the Selke conversation on a more consistent basis. I know he finished first in the voting last season. But the guy has been, I think, that level of good for 3-4 years now. And I think he's just starting to maybe get the recognition that he deserves. I understand why that's happened. It's because he plays in Florida. And they've been bad. And he's also not the flashiest player in the world. If you watch him play, like you can't get him off the puck. He's a very good stick handler, and he does have some moves and some dekes and stick handles where like it'll make it on SportsCenter top 10. But he kind of controls the game almost like Kopitar-esque. Like, he's not this flashy, dynamic skater that every time you go to a game, like, oh, look, the 16, who's that guy? You know?
I think that he's better than Kopitar. Like, I
think he's better than that. Stylistically, I was comparing him.
Yeah, right. I think he's one of the best players in the NHL. Like, I think this easy could put him in this range between, like, top 10-ish, top 13. Like, he's easily there. And I don't. You said that he's an underrated Selke winner. He needs to start getting more recognition. 3 in the last 4 years, he's been a top 5 Selke candidate and finally did win it this season. So, I mean, he's been getting that recognition as like a top two-way centerman now for like 4 or 5 years. So he's getting that recognition. And sadly, as much as I want to say, I think Barkhoff is one of the most underrated players because that used to be true. People are quickly figuring out that Barkhoff is a top 15 player in the NHL, a top 13 player in the NHL. And I don't think it's a hot take to say that anymore. I think people are understanding and they look at it and they say, yeah, absolutely. And like, it's just a testament to how far he's kind of come. Like, I never would have looked at him back, early in his career and said, yeah, that guy's going to be a top 10 player in the league. And here he is in Florida, just killing it, doing everything on both sides of the ice. I absolutely love this player. He's only 25, so like it seems like he's been in the league forever, and he's only 25, so he still has like another 6-7 years to dominate and be one of the premier two-way centermen to ever play.
Yeah. Number 12 on our list is Mark Stone of the Vegas Golden Knights. Speaking of like Selke voting, 4 of the last 5 years, I've got him finishing in the top 3 in voting. Second 3 times and third this past season, with Barkhoff winning it. As a winger, by the way, for an award that you typically see more centers get voted on, but Stone's really been that premier forward for the Golden Knights really since he arrived there. I think they could use a center of his caliber to really pair with him, but I think he's the best player, or the best forward at least. Maybe he's even the best player. Is it a hot take to say he's the best player on the Vegas Golden Knights? Maybe not. Best player on one of the best teams in the league. He's been that for a long time, even in his last couple of years in Ottawa. I had him as my number 9 player overall, so a couple spots higher.
You had him in your top 10.
I did, yeah.
I went opposite. I think he's too high at 12.
Okay. Do you remember how low?
I may have had him around 20, maybe like between 18 and like 20, like that range. Just taking a look at a couple players who had higher than him. I don't look. Mark Stone is a fantastic player, and much like Barkhoff, has always been like the underrated guy in the NHL, to the point where he's no longer underrated. I think he's slightly overrated now. Like, I really do. Is he a premier two-way guy? Yes. Is he one of the best, if not the best, defensive forward in the league? Yeah. But we're talking about a player who you're calling a top 10 guy who has only scored 30 goals in the NHL one time. His 30-goal season. That's it.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Everyone looks at him and thinks like, oh, because whenever I yell out, say that stat, we're like, oh, he's a prolific scorer, this, that, but I'm like, you realize he's only had 30-goal season, and it was like he barely had 30 goals. He had 33.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, he has never had a 30-goal year. He's had 25 one other time. Outside of that, 22 goals, 23 goals, 20, 22, 21, and then 21 last year through 55 games, granted. But only twice he scored more than 25, and only once has he scored 30. It's not... Yeah, go ahead.
I guess it comes down to like, and this almost sounds crazy because the league is measured by goals, but how much do you value the goal scoring aspect of a player's game? Because I think, yes, that might be his weakest component that he has. I might say that every other part of his game is elite. And to me,
he's not a great skater either. Like, he's not.
But he controls the game when he's out there. Like, he finds a way around it. Like he's always got the puck on his stick. He's a great playmaker. He's got it. Of course, we know when it's in his own end. So I think just his overall impact on a game outside of scoring goals. And I know he hasn't scored 30, but it's not like he's Joe Thornton out there scoring 8 goals like when he was in his last couple years in San Jose. I think it's enough for me to put him that high. So maybe
we're talking about we're talking about top 10 players in the NHL. Like you have to do a little bit of everything and be the best at like everything, or pretty well close to it. And I just like Mark Stone, not a great skater, and he's just not as prolific as a goal scorer as
Yep.
most people think he is. Like he's just for whatever reason isn't. He has a really good rep of being one, but like the stats don't lie. You know what I mean? So, is Mark Stone like a top 20 guy? Sure. Do I think he's top 10? No. Do I think 12 is a little bit too generous? A little bit. I slot him in this 15 to 20 range. I think 12 is a little high. I think having him in the top 10 is slightly egregious. I'd be curious to see who you have behind him, who I think would be a better. Like I think Barkhoff is a better player than Mark Stone.
I do too. I did have Barkhoff higher.
I Mitch Marner is a better player than Mark Stone. I think Braden Point is a better player than Mark Stone. Like there's just a few guys here who are lower on our top 50 list that I had higher that I believe are better. But hey, this is why we did a consensus list, right? Like I could be totally in the wrong. But
and you know what?
That's the take. That's my hot take that I'm coming here. I think Mark Stone has been so underrated for so long that now he's getting overrated because people now look at him and they're like, I really got to go to bat for Mark Stone. But it's like you're showing your hand a little too hard now.
I think too, like you're not really. I think you're closer. You're a lot closer to what our consensus rank was than I was, because even though he's 12th in our ranking, the average ranking by our Locked On NHL experts was 19.3. It's just because there was so much variance in this 10 to 25 range that the guy that finished 19.3 ended up being the 12th highest, just because we had so many different people in that range. So 19 it was his average rank, which sounds like that's right around where you had him. So I actually I might have been one of the highest people that had him, that maybe helped push him up a little bit. But I didn't have him over Barkhoff. That's why it's interesting to me that he is above Barkhoff. Number 11 is another guy that I had a lot lower, but that was more a value thing for me. I've mentioned that a couple of times with the way I did goaltending on my list, but that's number 11, our final guy we're doing today. Andrei Vasilevskiy, goaltender from the Tampa Bay Lightning. His average rank, by the way, was 17.6. He is spoiler alert, just give it out there because we've got through everyone anyway. The number one goalie on our list is Andrei Vasilevskiy at number 11. And given our Hellebuyck conversation earlier, obviously we know that you had him number one.
Yeah, this guy is the best goaltender in the NHL. Like I understand your point where it's like, okay, he plays for the best team. And yes, that is correct. But like also just look at the underlying numbers. Like he is just elite. Like a 925 save percentage, 221 goals against. He had 5 shutouts through just 42 games this year. And I get it. He's playing with like an elite crop in front of him. But he still needs to make the saves, and he does that. Like I don't know how else to put it. What's the one stat? Oh crap! There's a stat here. Here, you tell me about Vasilevskiy, and I'll find the stat. It's like a win share stat. It's like a WAR, like a hockey stat WAR.
Yeah,
and
I was actually
the highest in the league. Like Vasilevskiy has the highest win share total in the league.
It's funny that I think the stat I was just looking for while you were talking is the one that you were thinking of. Because the one I saw on him a while ago was save percentage above replacement, and it actually comes out higher for him than you would think. And I think it does. That's why I'm not, even if I have Hellebuyck above him, Vasilevsky's number 2 for me. I'm not all in on it's all the team. I think he is an incredible goaltender, and I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but I can tell you Curtis McElhinney last year, his backup had an 875 save percentage. That was a whole half percentage point, 0.5 below where Vasilevskiy was save percentage wise. That's an enormous drop from one goalie to another. The year before, McElhinney was his backup again, 906 versus Vasilevsky's 917. The year before that, Louis Domingue, 908 versus Vasilevsky's 925. I could go on here. One more, 18. Vasilevskiy 920 and Louis Domingue 914. Even that's It's the smallest one yet, but it's still a sizable difference. So he's been a lot better than the guys that he's been, than his replacement level has been. And I thought he would be the number one goalie. I was not surprised in any way. So I do not have an issue with him being this high. I would have had him lower just because he's a goalie, but he's fun to watch too. You know, he's got that like Jonathan Quick athleticism to him, like the side to side split saves. He's about as fun to watch as a goalie maybe that there is.
Yeah, and he's just so big. Like he's just the perfect build for a goaltender, and it's just
remember that TSN picture.
Yes, yeah.
He's big. He's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big dude. Goalie point shares was the stat that I was looking for. Like, how many points did he get his team himself? Like, how many of the Tampa Bay points did he equate for? And he's number one in the league for goalie point shares at 9.6 points. So you look at how many points Tampa had this season. 9.6 of them are because of Andrei Vasilevskiy and the way that he played in relativeness to having an average, like a replacement level goaltender. Like that's number one in the league. Number two is Connor Hellebuyck, which, like I said, is the number two goalie in the NHL. But Andrei Vasilevskiy leads the league in goalie point shares at 9.6 compared to Hellebuyck's 9.1. So, and look, that's a bit of a fancy stat that's out there, but I like it, and I'm going to use it because it makes me sound right.
I love that. All right. Well, we're through our list. Number 20, Connor Hellebuyck. Number 19, Sebastian Ajo. Number 18, Braden Point. Number 17, Jack Eichel. 16, Mitch Marner. 15, Alex Ovechkin. 14, Brad Marchand. 13, Alex Barkhoff. 12, Mark Stone. And 11, Andrei Vasilevskiy. We'll have our top 10 on Friday's edition of this podcast, the Locked On NHL podcast. Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers will join me to go through that list. Again, if you're listening to the podcast anywhere on Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Locked On NHL, where you can now watch the podcast. And that's going to do it for us. This has been the Locked On NHL podcast. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Sneaky Joe Sports. Mike's at Mickey_Canuck. And we'll talk to you next Tuesday here on the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.